Hope you're doing okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. So I kindly ask us to mute our microphones so that we don't have that interference and feedback.
Casper, can you unmute your mic?
All right. Yes, I've unmuted my mic. All right. So we want to look at advanced project management. All right. We want to look at the assignment for the case study. So today we're just going to look at question number 1. And we are just going to look at the tips on how you can answer that particular question using the case study scenario that is provided and with alignment to the study guide module that we have. So most of the time when we are doing these things, we need to make sure that whatever we write, guys, the information, we take it from the study guide module. Let the study guide module be the primary source of information, or the primary source of whatever concepts, whatever methodology, whatever, anything that you're asked for. Use the study guide module. Most of the time, it does not have a lot of information on it. So what you do is you use it as a baseline. You use it as a baseline or as a skeletal to answer whatever you do on the questions in the assignment. So we're just going to quickly go through the case study that we have there, and we attempt the first question. Right. So winner's case study. Despite 2 emergencies, spinal surgeries, David Culver was able to deliver a sweeping technology upgrade to his client. When David Culver, project manager at consultants North Highland, took on the project to upgrade the IT and AV solutions at chip designer ARM's headquarters, he had no idea that he would be delivering much of it lying down. During the project, he was taken ill and had to undergo 2 spinal surgeries while delivering the project. My first bout of spinal surgery was much unexpected and was emergency operated, he says. I was supported by North Highland 100% all the way throughout my recovery. They provided me the opportunity to take time, recover, and rest. When the second bout came along, equally as unexpected, I found myself itching to get back to the project that I had missed out on. This meant finding new and innovative ways of staying connected to the project, managing it while he recovered from home. It was no mean feat. The project involved a sweeping overhaul of ARM's digital infrastructure, from its conference booking systems to its IT support. It was part of a larger £64 million expansion program taking place at the headquarters. Right. Complete all the work, the project required an element of construction work and software implementation, which took careful management to get right. However, I had to do a lot of it from his bed. It was ridiculously frustrating. Not just frustrating, but heartbreaking and disappointing. He describes how his team would go on floor walks around the site. Culver would join them via 360-degree camera, lying on his back with his laptop in a specially screen holder. He could only see what the camera saw. I couldn't tilt my head in a certain direction or touch anything, open that box, see what's in there. I had to ask a very competent and very patient team to do things for me. No matter the challenges, the tools that Culver adopted proved to be a lifeline. He used Skype for business and eventually Microsoft Teams to keep in contact with the team and in touch with the project's progress. Culver and the team shared documents on a cloud app and used text messages and phone calls when things needed to be discussed. I didn't want to lose momentum. That's the key thing, says Culver, with water ingress and some delays because of that. And I didn't want the project to lose momentum through any other means. Additional challenges. The water ingress issue came around the same time as ARM's acquisition by SoftBank, part of the way through the project. SoftBank unveils plans to almost double headcount globally, which, along with the water ingress in the new buildings on the site, started to impact on Culver's project and put pressure on the existing offices. Thinking on their feet, the team focused their efforts on the infrastructure, on the existing buildings to ensure that certain benefits weren't delivered too late. So the tech hub, which is the IT support center, was going to be housed in the new building, but ARM could not afford to wait for that benefit to be delivered, Culver explains. I therefore came up with the idea of using the space leading into the atrium of one of the existing buildings, and this has turned out to be a huge success. Manager at ARM. Culver had put him into his own project governance to make sure it was very strong. This again helped smooth out the edges when Culver had to work remotely. Right? I was able to easily capture and identify documents and put them in the right place within the cloud hubs, and know that my team would go to that space. A hybrid approach. While the construction elements of the project meant that the overall program and project had to fit into a linear Prince framework, Culver wanted his team to be iterative. He combined elements of Agile and Waterfall to manage his project, which helped ease the management of the project after Culver had his surgeries. All right. Allowing my team to incorporate agile ways of working meant that we became better connected, he says. We could engross ourselves, our daily stand-ups and retrospectives and sprint reviews and so forth, and make sure the project was not only on track, but that we weren't losing touch, and we were able to communicate. Right. When it came to deciding what from Waterfall and what from Agile to incorporate into the management of the project, Culver says it was relatively straightforward. The linear elements were primarily detected by the project stakeholders, and Culver and his team decided together what iterative elements they wanted to incorporate. We decided that we wanted actually to do daily sprints, to do reviews and retrospectives to ensure that at the end of the month or at the end of the period, we were ensuring that we were posted up and showed up. What we weren't able to take were things like running everything in a sprint. We couldn't say for this sprint we are going to deliver X because we are very, very dependent upon other influences and external forces. Benefits. Despite the unique challenges faced by Culver and his team, the project delivered a huge number of benefits to ARM. This included an AV suite featuring a Skype integrated system that was easier and quicker to use than the old system. The team digitized the room booking system, incorporating touchscreens by every meeting room to allow staff to check its availability and book it instantly. They installed 14 digital screens to deliver important and up-to-date company communications. Universal desktop hubs, each with docking stations, 2 screens, and a connected mouse, allowed employees to move around the business and come together to collaborate easily. Other benefits included the aforementioned tech hub, better AV equipment, external Wi-Fi, a mobile signal amplification system, a faster cable network, and a new visitor management system, among other things. Culver delivered the overall exactly when the ARM needed it. My project faced adversity on numerous accounts, both physically and within the team. Throughout every one of those challenges, it could have been easy to fall apart and lose yourself. Whereas I found it was much, much better to lean back on the governance that had already set up. You need to be able to learn or to lean on a team that you are able to trust to get you through the difficult times and reward them in that same process when the good times show up again. Right. So this is the case study scenario that we are having here of Mr. Culver, who delivered a project whilst he was on his sickbed. All right. So let's look at the questions. Question number 1. Praise the scope management process to the case study. In your discussion, analyze how the scope management process, if followed prudently, could have assisted the project manager to deliver the project with minimum risks, right? So there are 2 parts of the question that we need to answer there. The first part is appraising what scope management process is all about towards the case study. So we are told that this question is looking for the concept that talks about scope management process. So what do you do? When you're answering this question, usually you need to provide an introduction in your answer first, whereby you introduce what you are talking about, what you want to talk about within the body. Then you introduce the body, where you talk about the concept that is being asked of you. Then you give us a conclusion, whereby you just conclude on whatever that you would have discussed, right? So the question here, appraise. When you are told to appraise something, they want you to evaluate about that particular aspect. So you need to write information, right, concerning the scope management processes. What are the scope management processes that are available? So you take those scope management processes, then you explain what each process means. After you have explained each process, then you align it to the case study scenario that we have in this particular instance, right? So some other people, when they want to write this type of assignments, they want to say when they are appraising already, that's where they incorporate what, or that's where they align information from the case study. But if you do that, most of the time you might end up aligning things that are not alignable or things that do not match. So the best way to write these type of questions is to write the concept first, what it means, then you give a small heading of application whereby you apply it to the respective case study scenario that is there, right? So what do? You have to find out from the study guide module where they talk about the scope management process, right? So you search in the study guide module on scope management process, right? Because that's the concept that we want to talk about, right? Project scope management process, right? So it's here. So in a nutshell, all right, project scope management process is just one of the 10 knowledge areas that we know of in project management. All right, so when we talk about scope management, we're just looking at the kind of work that a project intends to do. All right, so in this particular question, in the introductory part of your answer, you need to write what project scope management is and what you intend to do with this project scope management processes in alignment with the case study scenario, right? That's the introduction part. Then on the body, that's where we start explaining these different processes that are available. So you have the plan scope management, right, which involves maybe all the processes that are required to make sure that a project includes all the necessary work to complete it successfully. All right. So this plan scope management is just there to establish how your project scope is going to be defined, validated, and controlled as the project progresses throughout the project life cycle. All right. Again, it perhaps provides you with a clear framework for managing your scope. All right. That's what it does, this plan scope management process. So if you are to read here, it says that it is the process of creating a scope management plan that documents how the project scope will be defined, valid, and controlled. So what you do now, you have the basic ideas of what these points are all talking about. You have the basic ideas of what these points are all talking about. Then you take those processes, you write in your own words, and then you add more flesh on the appraisal part. Then you apply it to the case study scenario, right? Let me share with you guys the answer on how this was done so that we can go through the answer together. All right. So come here. Okay. Right. So this is how I answered this first part. All right. This is how I answered this first question. So like usual, as I have said, at the introduction phase or the introduction part, introduce what you want to talk about. Then introduce the case study scenario that you want to include or that you want to align. Then afterwards, we go to explain the processes that follow, right? So, like I said, the introductory part, you introduce the project scope management, you tell us, you explain what it means, all right? So let's just go through the introduction, then we go next on what follows. Just want you to understand how you introduce your answer. Project scope management is a critical discipline that guarantees that a project delivers all necessary tasks while preventing the implementation of unnecessary activities that could potentially compromise the quality, cost, and time of the project. So the main purpose for doing this project scope management, or the main purpose for applying project scope management to your project, is to make sure that what is done on the project, the deliverables that are supposed to be performed on the project, you perform the deliverables that are agreed upon and not the deliverables that are not agreed upon. Sometimes some aspects may crop up or may come in play, things that maybe perhaps can even improve the project that is being done. But what we agree with our stakeholders is what you include when you look at your project scope management, is what is just included, right? It ensures that stakeholder expectations are aligned and that clear project boundaries are established throughout the project lifecycle. So the integration of multiple technological systems, organizational changes, and operational uncertainties render scope management particularly critical in complex digital infrastructure, such as the ARMIT AV upgrade project. So what I'm doing here now is I am aligning now, all right, the scope that this particular upgrade project has, or this particular upgrade project in our case study is talking about. I'm now aligning it to what? To my, I'm including it, sorry, into my introduction. This discussion or this report or this document critically evaluates the scope management process implemented in the ARM project and assesses the extent to which the structured application of these processes facilitates coordination, governance, and risk mitigation. Right. So with that, my introduction has got all the necessary aspects and all the necessary ingredients that are needed for a proper introduction. I have explained what project scope management is. I have also included the scope items within the what? Within the particular case study that we are looking at. And I have indicated what is going to happen next, right? After you are done with this, you go to the body. So on the body, that's where you analyze your scope management process with regards to the ARMIT and AV upgrade project, right? What are the processes? So those are the processes that we have read earlier on, or that we have seen earlier on within our what? Within our the study guide module, right? So what you do here, guys, is you start to explain. You write each process in here. Oh, here, this information to here is just appraising what plant scope management is. Then you look at the second part. The second part is whereby you what? You apply that appraisal. You apply whatever you would have thought about concerning the what? Plant scope management. Right. So far, from what we've just done here, or from what we've just looked at here, are there any questions? Right. Here, this question, do we write the introduction both, say what? Do we write the introduction, body and conclusion for every question, right? It's actually the most standard thing to do because most of the time you don't leave out a lot of things. And even the representation of work looks much, much way better if you structure your answer like that. So I think it depends. If you don't want to write it like that, it's fine, but I encourage people to use that particular way because it makes sure, or it shows some bit of coherence, and even your answers and your work is presented in a good way. All right. So plan scope management, like we said, here we are just looking at how you're going to define your project scope, how you're going to validate your scope, how you're going to manage your scope, how you're going to control your scope. So it's more like a plan, it's more like a structure or a framework that you come up with. It's a mini plan that shows us that as the project progresses, our scope, when it gets to this point, is going, this and this is going to happen. When it gets to a particular point, this and this is going to happen. If there are any changes within our scope, this and this is going to happen. So here they call it plan scope management, but it's just a process whereby we create a scope management plan that details everything concerning the scope. And scope is just the work that we need to do on the project. All right. So here, the first part, like I said, you explain what plan scope management is, all right? Then we go to the application. So maybe let's just quickly go through that together. The process of planning scope management involves the establishment, validation, and control of the project scope, like what I was just talking about earlier on. This process establishes a governance framework, which is what the scope management plan or a governance plan, right, which ensures consistent and direct decision making throughout the project life cycle. Kesna posits that a scope management plan that is comprehensive can improve project stability by formalizing procedures for managing scope changes and aligning stakeholder expectations. So if you read from this point, already I have given a plus or a benefit of what a plan scope management does when you use it in your project. All right. So the absence of a clearly documented scope management plan frequently leads to ambiguity and reactive decision making in major infrastructure and technological projects. Right. So I'm saying if it's not available, if you don't have it within the project, a lot of issues can happen when it comes to the management of your scope. So a structured planning approach was necessary to guarantee coherence and alignment with the broader corporate objectives of the ARM project, which is distinguished by its organizational complexity and numerous independent deliverables. I have appraised the plan scope management at this point, right? Now I need to apply it to the particular case study scenario that we have. So this is where maybe perhaps some of the problems come in play, because here you need to make sure that you find the right items that perfectly fits or that are applicable to the plan scope management aspect. All right. All right. So that's what we need to do here. Right. So what is the application there? Right. From what we saw, we have seen that everything that happened within the project showed an indication that scope planning was done. It showed an indication that scope planning was done. But our question was telling us here that if the scope management process followed prudently, all right, right, it's saying analyze how the scope management process, if followed prudently, could have assisted the project manager to deliver the project with minimum risks. So what we do is we identify areas or aspects that shows that scope management planning was done, and we also add on some other items that if maybe perhaps it was not done, but if it was done, so much and so much and so much could have happened. This and this and this could have been maybe prevented. So and so and so could have been achieved because of this plan scope management process. Right, let's go through this. The ARM IT and AV upgrade project demonstrated the implementation of governance tools such as a centralized RAID repository, which is risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies, right? And cloud-based document management systems, which were indicative of scope planning, right? So obviously, if you see that everybody is working towards the project, on the cause of the project, but they are working, they're using what? Using a cloud-based document management systems. It means there was scope planning that was done, that when it comes to the project scope, everybody can access it, everybody can make changes, or everybody can know what's happening, or can give maybe perhaps information on different scope aspects using the what? The cloud-based document management system. So it shows a bit of some planning on the part of Calvin as the project manager. So during the period when the project manager operated remotely due to the health challenges, these mechanisms ensured continuity and enhanced transparency. However, the project would have been improved by a more formalized scope management plan, which explicitly outlined the processes for managing scope changes. In the aftermath of the SoftBank acquisition, this would have improved the project's capacity to adapt to disruptions, which included water ingress and organizational restructuring. So, if we remember from the case study that we have read, there's a part there that shows us that there was a bit of problems that started to creep up when ARM was acquired, or when ARM was purchased by the SoftBank. And those particular problems, they were problems that were faced by the project manager. So we are saying, just because something has changed, the availability or the presence of a scope management plan was going to make life easier, and there were no challenges that this particular project was going to face if that particular project management, scope management plan was in place. That's what we are just saying here. Because if you check, it says that water ingress was a problem, and organizational restructuring, which came by the new owners, was again another problem, right? Crawford has observed that formal planning frameworks are indispensable for the preservation of control in complex and uncertain project environments. All right, so we are simply saying for this scope management plan, or for this plan scope management, if it was adopted, then those additional items that were brought in by a change of ownership would not have been a problem, because there would have been systems in place that deals with changes to scope. And those systems in place that deals with changes in scope, we find them in a project scope management plan. All right. So that's the first aspect there. Right. And the second item is collect requirements. Collect requirements process. Right. So what you do in a project is you develop a scope management plan, or a scope management blueprint that shows how scope is going to be managed. Now we need to know, what do stakeholders require from the project? That's where this collect requirement process comes in play. So what it does is simply you identify different stakeholder needs, and then you translate them into deliverables. That's what this collect requirement process is all about. So most of the time it involves stakeholders, that is the people that are involved within what? Within your particular project. They are the ones that are involved. So you collect their expectations and needs for the project using different tools like interviews, like maybe surveys, like meetings. You collect what they need the project to do, and then after that, you go to another stage. But this collect requirements is just collecting the needs or requirements of stakeholders. So the first aspect, again, you appraise by just explaining what all that means. Then we look at the application aspect is the other item on this, right? So by going through here, like I said, we are saying here, you are just gathering and documenting your stakeholder needs and expectations. By so doing, it helps you maybe perhaps to understand what your project must deliver, and to reduce any forms of misunderstandings within the project, right? Again, it also helps you to, because it acts as a foundation for defining project scope, and for even creating your work breakdown structure. You use those information that you collect in this particular collect requirements for that. Right. So let's just go through it. The collection of requirements is essential for guaranteeing that the project deliverables are consistent with the expectations and needs of stakeholders. The risk of rework or scope creep is minimized and ambiguity is reduced through the implementation of effective requirements management. Right. So now, when you have received the stakeholder needs, you already know exactly what is needed of you from the project. So what does it do? It also means that the risk of doing something that was not, or something that is not required, is diminished effectively. Right. So in complex projects, the failure to adequately account for the diverse requirements of stakeholders can lead to misaligned deliverables and decreased or lower user satisfaction. Consequently, it is imperative that the process of requirement collection be systematic, inclusive, and iterative. So I have appraised what collect requirement is. Then you go to the application part. After you've appraised, you go to the application part. You look at areas that can be aligned from the what? From the case study scenario that we are having. So obviously, we said when we are collecting requirements, we look at different stakeholders. So what are the stakeholders that existed in the case study that we have? Obviously, they are facilities managers, they are IT specialists, and things alike, or people like that. So we need to include them in the application. And let's just go through that. Requirement collection in the ARM project necessitated the involvement of different stakeholders, like the senior executives, the facilities managers, IT specialists, and employees. The utilization of technologies such as touchscreen, booking systems, integrated AV conferencing platforms, and digital communication displays is indicative of a precise translation of stakeholder requirements into functional deliverables. So what I did here is simple. I just look at what happened, or the deliverables that we got from the from the particular project. Obviously, from the deliverables, you are able to deduce the needs or the expectations which stakeholders had towards the project. So I use them because, remember, this project was called a success, meaning that whatever was delivered is whatever stakeholders wanted. So by looking at those touchscreen booking systems that were delivered, it shows us what? It shows us that there was effective translation of our stakeholder requirements into functional deliverables. Right. Furthermore, the evolving organizational context that resulted from the SoftBank acquisition necessitated continuous re-evaluation of requirements to accommodate the increase in demand for digital infrastructure and expansion of the workforce. Right. So this illustrates an adaptive approach to requirements management. What we are saying is just because there was a change in the organization, another organization bought another organization. What it means that obviously the stakeholders' requirements were going to be altered, or were going to change significantly. Why? Because maybe these new guys, the SoftBank guys that have come in play, they also wanted to add some other items on what? On the particular on the particular scope that we already have, or on the particular needs that we already have. So there was a room for having an approach which was adaptable in order to accommodate those needs. If maybe perhaps they wanted new things to be added, it means also what? You had to have an approach that we're going to look at their requirements also and incorporate it in the project. Because at the end of the day, whatever we do on projects, we do it for the purposes of stakeholder satisfaction and meeting or exceeding their needs. So that's another aspect that I got from there. Nevertheless, a more structured requirement documentation and prioritization process would have further improved alignment and mitigated the risk of scope expansion. Right, Kate? emphasize on the importance of structured requirement management in dynamic organizational environments to ensure strategic alignment. Right? So that is the second aspect. Then, if you look at the third aspect just talks about what define scope. It talks about define scope. So when you are defining scope here, it's simple. You have firstly remember we said what you plan. You have a plan that shows you how your scope is going to be managed, how it's going to be validated, and things like. The second aspect you have your what your collect requirements. You have collected what each and every stakeholder needs towards the project. Now you need to define your scope. So you define your scope according to whether or not the needs of your stakeholders are in alignment with what? With the project strategic objectives. All right. So here you are simply defining scope. That is, you are clearly outlining your project deliverables, your project boundaries. You are providing your project maybe perhaps objectives, your project maybe perhaps assumptions and things alike. Right. So this particular process here, um, it's just a process, okay, whereby you develop what we call a scope statement. And what is found in a scope statement is that it outlines everything about the scope, from deliverables, from acceptance criteria, from constraints, from assumptions, from all things about the particular scope. So it's just a process whereby you come up with or whereby you develop the comprehensive scope statement, right? After that, you go to the application and you do the same thing also is you have done with like we have done with other what with the other points or um with other processes that we have explained there. So you define your scope, then you develop your work breakdown structure. I think I've explained on this. On developing work breakdown structure, you simply have to break down your project deliverables into smaller, more manageable components, which helps you to what? To get better estimations of your costs in the project, of your time and of your resources. So that's what this development of a work breakdown structure is. So you do the same. You simply explain on the appraisal of it, like you explain what it means, then you apply it as usual. So this is what was done on all these other elements that are available up to the control scope is the last one. All right. So I think you've got the gist of it, how it's done, how you define your process, how you apply it, and this is how it's done, guys. All right. So I'm not going to finish all of them because of time. I'm just going to end on these three items that I have explained there. All right. So, are there any questions on what we have talked about there? On how you structure your assignment, how you answer the assignment by making sure that you do the appraisal first, then you do the second part second. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
I just want to find out, I know that this is a tutoring session, but as a tutor, do you have services where you proofread like the assignment that you've done and sort of give pointers on maybe if it needs a little bit more, if you've done it in a satisfactory way before submission time, or is it only purely just going through the assignments that we have?
Well, I honestly speaking, I don't have that capacity to proofread each and every assignment. What I just do is I just point you in the direction that you need to take, and I show you how you go about those items, so that as you do your assignments, you will be knowing exactly what's needed there, or things that you need to include and things that you don't need to include. But I don't have that facility for doing proofreading and all that.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, just before we end, thank you so much to our tutor. I just want to emphasize that this was just an introduction class. We will be going deeper into the topic. That will be set around next week. We will send the link out in the group, so that'll be 200 Rand. And we will also offer the service to proofread the assignments and also to assist you in the assignment. But all that information will be shared in the groups, and then you can get more information from Sharon. Okay, thank you so much.